Even for monsters, they're more than the sum of their parts. Here's your look at the new Trick or Treat Studios Hammer House of Horror, The Curse of Frankenstein 1/6 scale creature figure. No one who saw it lived to describe it. Trick or Treat Studios is proud to present the officially licensed Hammer Films The Creature 1/6 scale figure from the Hammer horror classic The Curse of Frankenstein. Featuring the likeness of the incomparable Christopher Lee as the creature, the figure comes complete with shackles, with chains, and detailed wardrobe. Well, someone's got some strange science experiments going on in Switzerland. I'm going to be here grabbing the tape measure to see how tall the Curse of Frankenstein creature stands. While doing this, I'd also like to thank the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios that were kind enough to provide this sample. Hey, good news. If you guys are interested and would like to get your hands on the creature before he gets his hands on you, the figure is right now in stock on their site for $179. If you've just recently watched my review of the Count Dracula, that figure is actually $20 more than what we're getting here with Frankenstein, and I could see the justified reasons for that. We'll talk more about in a moment. $179 up front, or you can also go as well the 4 interest-free installment route of $16.16 every single month until this guy gets paid off. Frankenstein's going to, though, stand at about 11.5 inches in height, or the creature's going to stand 29 centimeters tall. Both characters would have been played brilliantly by actor Christopher Lee, though with The Curse of Frankenstein, this actually predates the earlier looked at Dracula by 9 years. Curse of Frankenstein, 1957. Dracula, though, was from 1966. The thing, though, about it, though, is that both movies also feature Peter Cushing, but if you're looking at the two, if both were played, obviously, by the same actor, then the figures should be about the same size. If you were, though, to line up the two eye lines, you can see, though, that Frankenstein, though, is just a little bit shorter than Dracula here. That thing I was mentioning earlier about the justified prices is that the creature from The Curse of Frankenstein is currently going on their site for $179. On the other hand, though, the Prince of Darkness Dracula is $199, so it's a difference, though, between the two of $20. But you really, though, have to look at the accessory count that comes included with Dracula. Not only did he have some additional afforded material used for his cape, but he had not just one, but 2 superior head sculpts and 3 swappable hands. If you then look at the creature we get from Curse of Frankenstein, he doesn't have, first of all, any additional hands, and the only other things that he has other than his body is that he also comes with a pair of shackles. The shackles are nice, though, for what they are. They are obviously real working chains, and they seem to be actually metal as well. These don't open up in any way, so in order to get them around his existing hands, you actually have to remove the hands from his forearms. So we'll do that right now. It's just a case, honestly, of rolling up the sleeves. You just take the hands and wiggle them back and forth until eventually you remove them from the posts. Take then your shackle, slide it up the forearm. I know you guys have probably already seen this a couple of times already with other figures, and just basically pop the hands over top of that. It's a look that you can choose for yourself how you want to have it displayed on the shelf. But I mean, obviously for me, I'd like to have Frankenstein, really, for that matter, with shackles. And again, those just slide over top of his hands like that. Put the new hands back in place, and now you got yourself Frankenstein with the shackles. The shackles do add a little bit of weight to it just by the material that they've decided to use. I'm glad, again, that they've used metal and not just plastic, because it gives a nice little real weighted feel to it. But it does look good, and it adds a little bit more to it. The simplicity, though, has to be acknowledged here when it comes to the creature. The thing I really liked always about the Hammer version of Frankenstein, if you want to call it Frankenstein, is that the monster was very simplified. I mean, certainly when it comes to his outfit. His face is far from being simplified, and one of the things that also is really interesting is that they had to obviously make a design of the creature that looked nothing like Boris Karloff's version of Frankenstein's monster. What we get, though, is a nice little change of pace, although there's still enough reading here that you can really recognize that this is the creature. First of all, obviously, is the staples all across the head there, the stitches. That really adds, first of all, that likeness to Frankenstein without flat out just telling you that there's the bolts on the sides of his neck and not really obviously replicating the look that Karloff had done so successfully from before. One thing that Hammer has done really well is that they redesigned all their characters. So still looking at this, it has the blueprints, the DNA, the building blocks of Frankenstein without flat out saying, like, this looks exactly like a carbon copy of the Universal monsters we got before. Headsculpt looks fantastic, though. I don't know how painful this would have been for Lee to wear this makeup. One of the things notably is that he has this dead eye on one side of his face. It seems, though, in the movie that it looks almost painful him to wear. It probably would have been, again, an additional prosthetic contact lens. but it makes his eye almost larger on this side than it does on this side here. Again, I can't even imagine the amount of pain that it probably would have been certainly uncomfortable. Not to mention as well some additional layering of makeup. They would have had some scarring there on the sides of his face. It's just a grotesque looking Frankenstein. I also really like the way that Trick or Treats have approached this. Well, again, we don't get a secondary head sculpt that we would have got, like, for example, when we looked at the Prince of Darkness Dracula. I feel they more than make up for it with a really stellar looking sculpt of the character. There's not really much in the way of paint. I mean, the paint is clearly there, but there's not really a lot of darker, lighter colors, for example. There's very much kind of a really pasty look to his face like you would have had in the movie. And it's only really just a few little traces of the red that he has, not to mention the ears underneath his eyes and all these nice little stitches that he has all across the top of his forehead that really, again, just give this guy a really off-putting look to him. One thing I really also like about this version of Frankenstein is the way they outfit this guy. So, like in the movie, he obviously would have had bandages at one point. He basically just would eventually take them off. And then he wears this very long jacket. It gives him this odd-looking silhouette to him because it's only really just his hands and his head that stand out. Everything else is just a long, very tapered-off shape. The jacket itself, as you can see, has a very high collar. I mean, this whole section would be buttoned up the front in the actual movie itself. What they've done, though, for the 6-scale release is that there's a snap here. If I can get my hand out of the way, there's a snap right there, there's a snap there, and there's a snap there. If you were to unsnap these, which I really didn't want to do, underneath this would actually be, if I just peel this away, his outfit underneath. And then the outfit itself does also have some additional snaps. So there is the means, if you wanted to, okay, we'll just unsnap everything. Take the middle one off and we'll open it up so you can see. Even though maybe you have no intended plan to ever really take the jacket, or even for that matter, open up the jacket, at least you can see that they've done just as much work on the inside tailoring of the shirt as they did for the outer end of the jacket. Again, I would never really display the figure with the jacket open like this, but you can see like the shirt itself looks good. And if we also open that up, even though there's really no sculpting on the inside of it, they've at least kept the colors, that pale color, to match the top of his head. Even if, like for me, you decided to peek underneath the hood to see what's exactly going on and what makes this monster tick, you can see that at least they used matching colors. And obviously that comes more apparent true when you look at the forearms. The forearms obviously have to match the hands. And again, like the plastic being that this is molded and then this part is painted, is pretty close and pretty seamless. And of course, we'll just have to button that back up. The buttons themselves, they only are snapping in 2 places. So you got a snap here on the top, which again, you've got this tiny little snap. Not the easiest thing. Dracula also had this as well, where you had these snaps though on the front, and these just snap back in place. I may even have to go back and do this a little bit later, but those just snap in. I mean, ideally, they could have also used Velcro. The only thing about Velcro is it sort of looks unsightly, especially from the side. Snaps are the cleanest way of going. Unfortunately, though, it just means a little bit more work on your part to get them closed if you ever decide you want to open up the jacket like this. For the rest of the sculpting, of course, most of it is just handled here in the hands. You got these nice pale-looking hands. Very little in the way of some additional paint. Not that it necessarily needed it either. The fingers don't look grimy, and I don't really feel like there's so much work that they've done, say, up here. I don't feel like they needed to do anything really when it came to the hands. They could have maybe bruised the hands up, make it look a little grimy or something like that, but I really don't think the hands necessarily needed them. But again, you got the very long jacket. The jacket continues its way down to about the areas of the knees, and then you got the slacks underneath. The slacks, if you were to roll them up, you also got as well the shoes underneath, which are actually different shoes, they seem, than the Dracula we've already had a look at. Very flat soles on the bombs. You can also see as well, they've even sculpted, and this is one thing I'm really glad to see that they, speaking of attention to detail, is that they've actually put the part where the heel of the shoe would have been attached by the shoemaker. Very, very cool the way they've done that. But for the articulation, though, for the creature, I'm going to go back to his head sculpt here. So with his head, if you've already had a look at my Curse of Frankenstein, or the Curse of Frankenstein, the Prince of Darkness Dracula, the articulation for the head is going to be exactly the same. So the head is attached to the neck. It's all one piece. But despite having what you would imagine be limitations for the head, actually it quite freely moves up and down. It's basically sitting itself onto a ball joint. The head can also rock back and forth. And for all intents and purposes, too, you'd be able to rotate it all the way around as well. For the arms, despite having, though, the long jacket like this, the arms can easily come out at 90 degrees. You take the arms and move them forward. You can move them back. There is a swivel, though, at the bicep, a double hinge like with Dracula before, and the hands also rotate all the way around. For the legs do split out. You can bring them forward. You can bring them back. There's a swivel, though, at the top of the thigh. About 3/4 of the way up the thigh, there's a swivel cut. The figure also does have a double hinge on the knee. And like with Dracula before, even though really these boots are all molded in plastic, and the plastic goes fairly high on the ankle, it still seems to retain some decent levels of posability. You can rock the ankle back and forth, and you can certainly as well move them up and down as well. All in all, though, I'm really liking the look of Frankenstein, or the creature, if you prefer. The creature probably could have used a little bit of dusting, roughing up of his jacket, but I actually kind of like the way it looks just like a stark black. And again, speaking of characters, bringing back in Dracula, we've already had a look at, again, played both perfectly by Christopher Lee. I know obviously a lot of people tend to think of like Boris Karloff as the go-to Frankenstein's monster, but you also really need to look into and branch off into the stuff that Hammer was producing as well in the 60s and 70s. I mean, the stuff with Frankenstein, for example, is still frightening. The grotesque nature of his design of his face. I would imagine still it would probably be quite uncomfortable for the actor Christopher Lee to probably wear the prosthetic and the makeup that he would have been wearing in that movie. He would have had to really suffer a whole lot less when he was obviously Dracula 9 years later. But the Frankenstein's monster, while having more simplicity to the way they approach not only the outfit, but also as well the accessory count. Because keeping in mind, again, like this guy has one less head, he has 3 less hands, and the only thing that he really has to his credit is that fact he also has some additional shackles that go onto his wrists. Despite that, though, the figure you have to keep in mind is $20 less than Dracula. And still for $179, you got to imagine, like, that's pretty decent pricing when you think of, like, 6-scale figures. How many other 6-scale figure companies on the market are producing figures for under that $200 price point? By the way, though, the Frankenstein, or creature, was also sculpted by the talented artist Alexander Ray. The same, in fact, artist that also sculpted both the head portraits for the Prince of Darkness Dracula. As it is right now, both of these are available right now. They are, though, listed on Trick or Treat's site as being limited edition, which might very well mean that they were also produced in smaller numbers. That means if you guys are fans of the Hammer horror collection, the Hammer horror films of the 60s and 70s, you may want to get your hands on Frankenstein before he moves away. It is a shame, actually, that Christopher Lee is such a memorable Dracula that it ends up ultimately casting a shadow over the other monster that he played in the Hammer horror universe, the 1957 Curse of Frankenstein creature. Such very different approached roles. Obviously, he probably had an easier time playing the Prince of Darkness from the standpoint of makeup, had so many more layers of stuff added to his face to portray the role of the creature from the 50s film. One of the other things, too, is just the fact that he had that prosthetic dead eye, which looking at him in the movie, it looks like it would have been really painful. This portrayal of Frankenstein is very much the departure from the Karloff approach that we got from the original Universal monsters. And obviously that was one of the things that Hammer had to do differently because they couldn't tread on the same territory that the earlier monster did. They had to do their own thing. And even though, again, it's not a character that maybe stands out as much in the annals of horror films, maybe as much as Lee's performance, obviously, in Dracula, because Dracula, you have to consider as well, had 9 films behind his role. He had a lot less, obviously, time to portray the creature, but it's still, for me, a memorable role. And I like with Hammers, they approached it differently than what we got before with Boris. Now, if you guys are interested and were a big fan of the original creature, obviously from Curse of Frankenstein, like to get your hands on this one, he is available right now as we speak at Trick or Treat Studios for $179. As already mentioned, it's going to be $20 less than the Prince of Darkness himself. So if you guys are interested, you can click the link down below in the video description. I'd like to obviously back that up a bit by thanking the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios that were kind enough to provide the sample of the 1957 horror movie classic, The Curse of Frankenstein creature, that we had the chance to have a look in this review. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comment section. Have you guys ever had the chance to watch the 50s Frankenstein? And let me know what you guys think of the design. I mean, obviously, I could put a poll down below of asking you guys which Frankenstein you prefer. But I know most people tend to think the OG with Karloff's portrayal. But don't overlook this sleeper of a monster. This Frankenstein was pretty cool as well. If you guys did enjoy this video, though, why not hit it with a like? If you guys are loving, the content, you want to certainly stick around for more. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. We're going to have more videos coming your way this week, so make sure you're coming back on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.